Hello. Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. So this is Tuesday, and this is episode 46 of Author Adventure. We're so glad that y'all are here with us today. And, you know, we're really excited. I'm really excited about our guest today. She's so fun to talk to and has lots of words of wisdom for us. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But Russ, I thought we ought to just, because it's July, we're like halfway through the year. Can you believe we're halfway through the year already? And I thought maybe we just want to share a few strategies or encourage people to be looking at what they're going to do over the next 6 months. If they've already got a book or they're writing, you know, and they need to be thinking about promoting now for Christmas. You know, because the retailers and people that buy early, there's a percentage of people, not me, I'm not one of them, but there are a percentage of people that buy Christmas presents early for other people. Imagine that, not waiting until the last minute. And so they're going to be looking in September and October to buy those books. So if you think you're going to wait and put your book up and load it or start pushing it out in November, well, that's okay, but you're going to miss maybe 40% of the audience that might buy. And then you also have the retail outlets that are doing their last buy. They're not going to wait till November and December and buy. They've got to buy that stock early so it gets shipped in time to be on the shelves when people actually come in the stores. So what else do you think people should do, you know, either marketing if they've got their book or maybe to finish writing their book by the end of the year? That might be their goal.
Well, and another thing to think about is marketing is not a one and done process. It's not a single event. It's more like an ongoing event. So anything you can do between now and say Black Friday or, you know, even before Thanksgiving, you know, continue to do outreach, continue to reach out to the individuals that you've talked to, or some people that you haven't reached out to for some time. And there's always going to be a part of your network that they kind of drop off and you kind of lose track of them, or you might not necessarily contact them every month or so. However, reach out to those individuals and check in on them, ask them how they're doing. And also you can mention that here's some things that you need to consider. And here's something that I'm sharing with you. I'd love to have you participate in this process and share it with your community as well. And don't be afraid to ask for testimonials for those that have received your book, purchased your book, and also maybe haven't quite got to the point of leaving a testimonial yet. Because testimonials really add that influence and that information that some purchasers need to know about in advance before they pull out their wallets. So wherever you buy your book from, if you purchase from Amazon or Barnes and Noble or even a retail outlet, if you purchase from Amazon or Barnes and Noble, an online site, you can go back into the site and post a review. If you purchase your book from the individual author or maybe a retail outlet, you can still go to a place like Goodreads, which is a book website where authors congregate, where readers congregate, and readers leave those reviews on those Goodread author pages. So check those things out if you haven't done that. That's obviously a great resource for you too. If you're a new author, or even if you're a current author and you're not using Goodreads, you might want to look at that as an option because there's a lot of readers already there. I mean, people that go to a site like that, they're avid readers. They buy books daily, weekly, monthly. So keep that in mind. But we don't want to take up all our time. We really want to talk to our guest today. So I am very excited to have my friend
the Dr. Reverend Fran Tilton Shelton here with us today. And we're going to be talking about two of Fran's books that she has. Her first book was called No Winter Lasts Forevers, and it was a memoir, and it was a love story of loving Bob and loathing Alzheimer. So it's about her journey with her delightful and lovely husband during a 6-year struggle or more of fighting this terrible disease. And now she's got a new book. So we're going to start with her new book, and then we'll catch up with the other book. But her new book is called The Spirituality of Grief. And so we really want to talk about that. It's 10 practices for people that are left behind, basically, or that remain. And what do we do with this grief? So welcome, Fran. We're so glad you're here today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's great.
You bet. So really excited. So you've got a new book that just came out recently, right? And so,
Yeah.
but it still is still in the same vein of what you do. Why don't we start with kind of a little bit of your background so people have that and they understand, and tell us a little bit about, founding the nonprofit and a little bit of your journey, and then we'll talk about the book specifically.
Sure. In 2002, I was called to large congregation to serve in the area of pastoral care. And the second week I was there, they informed me that I would be having a grief class. And so I had never facilitated a grief class before. And that first try was, it was a combination of people who were there because of the death of a loved one, whether it was a child, a spouse, parent, sibling, and also the grief associated with divorce. After that first session, I quickly realized I needed to separate those two because the dynamics and nature are so similar, and yet the points of anger and sadness, they have very different levels going on. So I split those up. Then I returned working with these individuals. This is who I learned the most about grief, because people in that process are authentic. They are real. They share openly, and they taught me a lot. And so I decided I wanted to go back and get my Doctor of Ministry degree and find out what brings people comfort.
Right. Yeah.
I did that. And in that process, then I learned so much that people want to be connected to a compassionate community. They want a safe place where they can name their loved one. They want to be around other people who get grief. And most importantly, they want to share stories about their loved one. So that started. And then what evolved out of that in 2011, I formed a nonprofit with two colleagues, the Reverend Wendy Finn and Sharon Balch, and it's called Faith and Grief Ministries, and started here in Dallas, but now we're in different parts of the country.
Yeah, you're kind of spread all around.
We are, because we want individuals to know that they are not alone in their grief. That is a terrifying feeling, and it doesn't need to exist. We're here for you. We're here in person. We're here online. We're through all kinds of ways, book clubs that we do on our website and things like that too. So
yeah, and y'all have a podcast too, don't you? You have a podcast
we do.
where y'all bring in people and you have speakers and interviews.
Sure. Yeah. Authors and people are also interviewed there, because that's a way in which people, in their grief, if they tend to be maybe introverted, they want a book where they can just kind of pull in and read that book, and then they feel like there's other people with them, because the stories that are in books connect with them.
Yeah. They feel that emotional
definitely.
connection. Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah. Well, and so tell us now a little bit about your the spirituality of grief. Let's talk about that book a little bit, and then maybe you may want to share your process for how you write books, or how you put things together, or how you even start, because a lot of times that's the problem. That's what people ask. They want to write the book, or they're working on something, or they've they've journaled or they've taken some notes, but they don't know what to do kind of next. So what would you share with them about that? And then tell us about the book. And
Okay. Well, I think that it was Mark Twain originally, but I heard it first from my grandmother that you are halfway in the process when you begin. So what I mean by that is when you sit down with a number 2 pencil and a legal pad or your computer and you begin writing. I had that reinforced while I was writing, that so often people think that writing is about the motivation, and you do need to have that passion. It's more about the discipline. So discover what kind of person you are. Do you work better early in the morning or at night? And set aside that time and don't let a day go by. Even if you write pages and pages that you're going to wind up deleting, there is growth that takes place in that. So I just want to encourage you, write.
In that process. Yeah, for sure. Because it's always easier to come back and edit something once you've got it down, than to not have enough, so you never can write too much, or everybody thinks, well, you can write too much. And, and a lot of people ask, well, how many words, 1,000 words, we don't even do it. I've never done a word count. I've always done a page count. There's about 100 words, 125 words per page, depending on your point size. But most people are writing on an 8.5 by 11 page, but when you get a book, that book is not 8.5 by 11. It's usually 5.5 by 8.5. So half that size, or 6 by 9 is the standard kind of biography, memoir, or business type book. So whereas the 8.5 by 11 is, 8.5 by 5.5 is more of a trade paperback. So it's going to be longer than you think it is. You're going to add pages once you get into the publishing process. So, well, what was so I know you've done 2 books, you did one with us, we did one together, and then you did another one. And so I think there probably was a little bit difference in the process, but maybe not. What do you think was the most interesting thing you learned, I guess, or the biggest issue maybe, and then the most surprising thing, I guess?
Well, both experiences were fabulous. They were far beyond anything I ever dreamed that I would be doing. And I think the book that I did with you, Liz, there was a lot of just freedom, and listen about what I wanted on that cover. My husband and I had a beautiful backyard, and Robin was always around. And so I wanted that Robin in the wintertime. That is a quote from Hal Borland, who is an environmentalist. And I came across it when I did grief work. The full quote is, "No winter lasts forever. No spring skips its turn." And that quote elicits so much hope in my own grief journey. And I felt like it would in other people's, to know that this time is not going to last forever. So that's why I wanted to do that. And of course, it was quite easy to talk about the love of my life with Bob Shelton and share stories about that. When Broadleaf Publishing reached out to me, it was fascinating. I'd never heard of an acquisitions editor. I didn't know what that was. And they just said, would you be willing to write a book? And I was like, well, let's talk about that. So I came up with the working title. It's kind of interesting. I came up with the spirituality of grief, 10 practices to promote comfort. And they said, well, the spirituality of grief is maybe, we'll work with that. And sure enough, they did. And I find this to be so interesting. They came back and they said, how does the spirituality of grief sound? And I said, it sounds familiar. And a young woman on the committee had recently experienced the death of her daddy. Yeah. And she said, I would not pick up a book that overpromises. So rather than saying practices that promote comfort, they changed it to practices for those who remain. And I so appreciate her honesty in feeling that way. And so I think it's a title that still evokes interest for people who are curious about spiritual practices, and I'm a spiritual director as well. I have a firm belief that it is the Holy Spirit that brings us comfort and strength. So I wanted to include these spiritual disciplines, one after each chapter, so that individuals could, perhaps for the first time, learn about these practices and have them right there in their hand, and possibly do them one every day, one a week, whatever. It's
Right. And actually practice them. Because grief is not a one-time thing. We kind of mentioned earlier, marketing is not a one and done kind of deal. And neither is grief. It's up and down and all around. And
well,
like
and with
say,
grief, it's, I mean, given our society right now, we're inundated with it in our paper and with mass shootings. And I have found that each time a friend, even a stranger, when we read about their death, we go through that same process of being somewhat shocked and sad. And the grief just wells up again. And we're at a different place in it. And yet many of the dynamics and especially dealing with the emotions that are a plethora of emotions that surface. And I think it's hard for people to admit their feelings. In classes, I would kind of give them the short version, like you're either mad, sad, glad, or scared. And the fear kind of screws up the rhyme pattern. But when you think about it, because in grief, there's also usually not just one feeling. You can be mad and sad. You can have a measure of, after my husband battled with Alzheimer's for years, there was a sense of relief and gladness that Bob no longer was confined to those limitations, but enormous sadness.
Yeah, for sure. And such a fine man too, and so
wonderful.
So many contributions to so many people and to the world and schools, and because Fran's husband was the head of he worked at the theological seminary for years. He was a pastor. He filled in even after he retired. He came back and was a pastor again, an interim pastor for folks. And so, and he loved Willie Nelson. So anybody that loves Willie Nelson, is okay with us. Those of us in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, and Bob had the, joy of getting to officiate at a wedding on the set of The Redheaded Stranger at Willie Nelson's place. So that was fun. Yeah, he was a great preacher. He was a marvelous instructor and just a very sensitive, wise man.
Yeah, for sure. So great memories, and I know you have so many memories, and I'm glad that you had that, and you had that time together, and you were able to spend time together, and you made that choice, because that's the other thing too. It is a shock. It does, when you get a diagnosis and you're planning other things, and then all of a sudden you've got to do a different plan. You got to figure out a different process and a different plan. And so what, if you don't mind, can you share one of the practices that you think might help folks, and then we'll
a practice that I really was not familiar with the practice until I started my certification process to be a spiritual director, and that was in 2009, and they're called breath prayers. So one of the things that, you can do even as you're listening here, perhaps just close your eyes and put your feet flat on the ground so that you are grounded. Palms up so that you give a visible sign that you're open to the gifts that God brings to you of comfort. And then simply notice your breath.
Okay. Yeah. So
change it, just notice it and recognize. Some people say see your breath enter into your body. So you can sort of visualize it coming through your nose and going down into your lungs and then releasing it. And there's a calming effect with this. There's also an opportunity for prayer because as you breathe in, if you come to the divine in any way, O divine creator of earth. So say that as you breathe in, O divine creator of earth. And as you exhale, comfort me, strengthen me. And so you just with each inhale, you come back, and with each exhale. So many of us, our minds hop all around. And yet with this breath, with every inhale, you can get back on track. You can center down. And it can be done in a grocery store line. It can be done while waiting in a doctor's office. It can be done at night when it's difficult to find a way to sleep. It's a marvelous prayer, and we are blessed to have breath.
Yeah, for sure. And so breathing is, it's something we take for granted that we don't think about. And so to be conscious of it and to be and consciously make the decision to use that as a practice, I think is very helpful for people. So we want to encourage you. We want you can find the Spirituality of Grief. You can find that at your online outlets, retail outlets like Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Local bookstores will have that, independent bookstores, chain bookstores. So that should be available all over the country. You obviously can go to FranTiltonShelton.com, and that's FranTiltonShelton.com, FranTiltonShelton.com, in case you're listening on our podcast. And so go to Amazon, buy this book. If you're in the process of grief in some form or fashion, and we know that a lot of times we think of that as a loved one that's passed, but it can be a job, it can be a relationship, like you say, it can be a divorce, it can be estrangement from friends or children or parents or siblings. There's so many different things. But if you know somebody that's struggling or you're struggling yourself, we really recommend that you go and check out this book. And so,
I tell people it's a beautiful gift that you can give to someone. And if you want to enhance that gift, I suggest you buy them a copy and you buy yourself one, and then extend the invitation to your friend and say, hey, why don't we read this together? You read chapter 1, I will, and we'll come back and talk about it. That way you have a chance to process it and debrief it, and people get different things out of a chapter. And then that way your experience with the book is expanded. So I suggest that you read it along with them and companion with them on their journey of grief. And it brings just such a sense of peace and encouragement to have someone with you.
Yeah, to have somebody with you for sure. Because I had any number of friends over the years who've said, Liz, does it ever get better? Does it ever get different? And I say it does. But if you're feeling that emotion, stop, pull off the side of the road and bawl if that's what you want to do. Scream if that's when cry if that's what cuss, whatever. Or if you don't feel like you can do that with somebody, call me and we'll do that together. So
you can do it together. And like Liz, you're so good about just encouraging them to name the emotion and give it expression, because it's not going to go away. It can either be released through tears or words or physical action in a safe way, or it's going to go internally into your body and cause distress and dis-ease in your body. So please. Yeah.
And I think that's a real thing. Don't you too? That we can't cause ourselves to be unhealthy if we don't have healthy practices and healthy ways to express our emotions and our feelings.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to call it the spirituality of grief, is that there's an author who says we're not human beings with a spiritual life. We are really spiritual beings in a human body. So we need to take care of our spiritual human body in a variety of ways. And you mentioned that your friend had said, it's not going to ever go away. So I do want to bring up something that I make a point in the book. Many people say they want to find closure. And I ask them to let's think about that in a different way. I don't think people really want closure. I want to help people to learn how to carry their grief so that it doesn't weigh them down and keep them from functioning at a high level and using the gifts that they have. I want to help them carry their grief, and in carrying it, they can connect with other people and find out ways in which they're carrying it. And together we go through it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great for sure. And so her mom had died of ovarian cancer and a long, very difficult, painful process. So,
right,
like you say, when you see them suffering, at least you're able to let go physically, but it's really, you still have that emotional process to go through. And I think, like you say, eventually you do get to at least a better a place that that you can keep, like you say, functioning and all of that kind of stuff. But before we go, I mean, our timing goes so fast, but we'll have to maybe have you come back and we'll talk again. But let's talk just a little bit about Bob's book, about No Winter Lasts Forever, because we know that there are a lot of families and couples and people that are struggling with an Alzheimer's diagnosis. And we know that strikes fear in the hearts of all of us. And so if you can share a little bit about that journey, and did writing the book help in that journey, or did it just
I didn't
I don't know.
I didn't start writing it until after Bob's death. And yes, of course, it helped immensely. It was a way that I now look back and helped me process it. For any, a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, any long-term debilitating, life-threatening disease, the shock, the love that can come through in a relationship is, I realized that for so much of Bob's life, he was affirmed by the way he preached and the way he helped people. And it was a time where he could be affirmed for being Bob. Whether he was going to work and working himself, like crazy, or knocking out an amazing sermon. So to help people in those times, I do for caregivers. I'm going to say this, and I'm pretty sure that people are going to nod their head and go, yeah. The earlier you can reach out and ask individuals to help you, whether it be so that you can go and have a cup of coffee with a friend for an hour, or they can take your loved one for a walk, around the block. You need that space to regroup so that you can come back and be more fully present with that individual, and you're taking care of yourself. It took me forever to finally reach out and say, okay, calf rope, I need help here. Right. And then once I did, it was better. And what it is there's a fear that, well, there's a lot of ego too, is that I can take care of him better than anybody else.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of fear of what that new person is going to do, or how your loved one is going to react to them. And so it may be that you go through a couple of caregivers before you find the one that
the right person. Yeah, the right person. Yeah.
Right. But for your loved one, for yourself, for the situation, please, I encourage you to, start off small and then see.
Yeah, because even just an hour a day, where you can lay down or two. Yes. I've got a friend, or my rodeo partner, it's got short-term dementia. he's being cared for at home, which is great. And he fell and broke his hip at Christmas. So we're struggling with that. But, just his wife, even though her daughter comes and helps her and the nurse comes by, she still needs that hour to be able to just lay down or take a shower or go pick up the medicine or go to the, do something at the store and check on our own son who, was also in the hospital at the same time. People just have things going on and we're just bad about asking for help. Especially as type A's that, like you say, we're used to doing everything ourselves. And, it's very difficult for people to ask for help, but we want to encourage that. So,
and your friends want to help and they cannot read your mind. They do not know what the best form of help would be. I remember there was some friends, James and Lana Self. James knew Bob. He said, I'm going to come and sit with Bob and you and Lana are going to go get a massage. And I was like, oh my goodness, what a simply beautiful gift. And I think Bob was kind of glad to get me out of his hair for a while.
Right. Right. Yeah. He was glad to talk to another man and have a visit with somebody else. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because it's them too. They need to break up their routine and stuff too as well, even if they have a hard time communicating or they don't exactly remember something. But if there's somebody they have a relationship with, they can, like for me, I can break the pattern. I can interrupt the pattern with a question or something that happened in the past or something we did together or something I know he did.
And since you are all about books, Liz, and what I wish that I had started earlier, which gave Bob and me both such joy, is I sat by him and I read out loud to him.
Read out loud, yeah.
Because a lot of times if you raise a question, they're not able to collect their thoughts and maybe the answer is in their head, but they can't get it on their tongue. But sitting next to them, they know that you're right there beside them. And then you both get to enjoy a book. I mean, we read books about baseball and history. And it was so great. I thought, why didn't I start this earlier? It was great.
Yeah, for sure. So great strategy, great tip there that friend Sharon. So we hope you'll go and find Fran's books. It's Fran Tilton Shelton. You can find The Spirituality of Grief, 10 Practices for Those Left Behind. You can also find her No Winter Lasts Forever. It's a memoir about loving Bob and loathing Alzheimer's. And so recommend both of these books to you. They're available on multiple platforms online at your local retail stores. So be sure to go get those copies. Even if you don't feel like you're suffering grief yourself right now, they're great resources, and we know there's somebody in your life that needs one of these books. So we encourage you to just share these as gifts with other people. And Fran, we appreciate it so much you coming. And like I say, we're our time is up, but my Russ going to beat me up for running over like I always do. But it was worth it. And
it
so
is. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. So this has been Liz Lawless, your Russ Johns, your host for Author Adventure. We've been talking today with the Reverend Dr. Fran Tilton Shelton about her books and about the grief process. And so you always know that we're here every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Come back and see us next week. Next week, we'll be talking with Chef J. Steven Sadler about his cookbook and while traveling around the world and finding the recipes and the ingredients for his family's 400-year-old Austrian crumb cake recipe. And he wanted to know what actual ingredients they used. And he had to become an import-exporter to actually get the products in. So they were all natural products. So come back next week and see us at 5 o'clock. Fran, thanks so much. Good luck with the books. We know those are going to be great resources and really help a lot of people through their grief process for sure.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.